The hype train is pulling into the station. Sony is pushing the new superhero movie, Morbius, this character being based on a vampire. So this got me thinking, with the upturn in vamp-based entertainment, the popularity of the BBC reboot of Dracula, could it be time to take a look at the Bloodsuckers? Here are 5 of the best, potentially real vampires from history. Cover your necks, put on a garlic vest, and grab a steak. And let's take a look. Welcome to IF, videos on history, mystery, and the strange. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a video again. The vampire legend has long been with us, and it has created billions of dollars from the sale of everything from books to movies and even role-playing merchandise. The Bloodsuckers have even been used to sell cereal. Now, the comic book movie craze steps back into the shadows, something it hasn't done since the Blade movies. The Marvel character Morbius the Living Vampire, aka Dr. Michael Morbuis, is a fictional character appearing in Marvel Comics. Roy Thomas was the man responsible for the character's creation, and the iconic design was down to the penciler Jill Kane. Morbius first showed his vampiric self as the antagonist in The Amazing Spider-Man number 101. The Spider-Man villain and later anti-hero was based on the horror icon that is Dracula. This being said, he is not a true vampire. He does have vampire-like abilities, these coming from a failed treatment of a rare blood disorder rather than the bite of a Nosferatu. He does share the same bloodlust as normal vampires, and this leads him to attack people, and of course this is where Spider-Man has to step in and stop the pseudo-vamp. The comic book villain was inspired by the creation of Bram Stoker, Dracula being a character they wanted in the pages of the Marvel Universe, but they were unable to secure the rights, so they made their own version. The character Dracula was in turn based on the real-life tyrant Vlad the Impaler, these stories both being interwoven with the rich legends of vampires which are as old as civilization itself. So, with such a rich history, there must be some good evidence for the existence of these creatures of the night. Let's take a look at 5 potentially real-life vampires and see if we can uncover some truth behind the thousands of tales of blood-sucking, shape-shifting, and never-aging princes and princesses of darkness. First up, we have to start with the most famous and the most popular, and dare I say, the most charming of vamps, Lord Dracula. Based on the real-life figure Vlad Tepes, the 14th century lord. The story really begins when, in 1442, Vlad III and his younger brother Radu were gifted to a sultan named Murad II, who ruled over the Ottoman Empire at the time. The brothers were kept captive, ensuring that the Hungarian loyal principality would stick to the peace imposed by the Ottomans. The boys actually gained some advantages from their incarceration, being educated to the highest level of the time. They were tutored in science, philosophy, and the arts. This is when some historians make the argument that Vlad also learned the art of impalement, an action he became so infamous for, it led to him being gifted it as a moniker. Vlad's cruelty is well documented in historical texts, but what often goes overlooked is how he combined this cruelty with cunning to terrorize his enemies. Some have suggested that this was the beginning of the vampire tale, with stories told of Vlad drinking human blood. A 15th century German poem indicates that Vlad was a blood drinker. The poem points out that Vlad enjoyed dining among his impaled victims, dipping his bread in their blood, this making him a real-life vampire, and from there, the legend grew. The second story goes back to 1582, a one Johannes Countess, a civic official with a surname destined to get him into some trouble. Coming from the Czech town of Pench, the man met his maker, or maybe did not, when a horse kicked him in the head. The unfortunate man was taken to his bed to die from the injuries, when another bad omen arrived in the form of a black cat which jumped up onto the bed. The man passed away from his equine-related injuries, and this is when villagers began to report strange goings-on. These villagers claimed that they saw the man roaming the streets in the night and that he left a foul smell everywhere he went. The people in the village claimed that the undead man was feeding off them while they slept. They needed to put an end to this before the sickness they claimed was being spread by the vampire grew worse. The solution was to exhume the body in the daytime, chop off the head, and burn what remained to ashes. This put an end to the strange phenomena. On to number 3, and a woman that often tops the list of history's biggest murderers, the Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Once again, we head to the home of Vlad, Transylvania. In 1560, the Countess was born into the wealthy ruling class. Elizabeth was a noble woman who had it all. She was beautiful and wealthy. She was all set to marry at the age of 12 to Ferenc Nadasdy, a rich gentleman of the day. The two wed in 1575 and by all accounts lived happily until in 1604 Elizabeth's love passed away. This sent the woman off the rails, and she was determined to stay young and beautiful and find herself a new love. She would attempt to achieve this by bathing in the blood of young virgin girls. She would have a loyal staff bring them to her, at first girls from the palace and eventually girls from nearby villages. She would slice them open, collecting their fresh blood in a tub in which she would wash. She believed the blood kept her young and beautiful, and there are those that say it did. Eventually she was made a prisoner in her own castle for these antics. Though she was never tried for her crimes, she lived there alone until her death in 1614, so I guess she didn't have the vampiric trait of immortality. On to the 4th spot, and we have the story of Alnwick Castle Vampire. The castle is a landmark in Northumberland, built in 1096. It has long been at the centre of many local myths and legends. One of these was the claimed existence of a vampire. This story was put to paper by historian William de Newburgh. The story begins with the man's death, as all vampire legends do, and then takes a bit of a bizarre turn, almost merging with the famous French tale of the Hunchback of Notre Dame. This because once the man had been buried, locals began to report a hunchback causing chaos. In a situation similar to that of the second tale, the villagers dug up the man's body in the daylight hours. They were a little less finessed than the previous villagers, hacking the corpse to pieces with their spades. As they did so, the body began to bleed, proof enough for the frenzied men and women that they had a vampire in their midst. They finished the process by burning the body, and the hunchback vamp was never seen again. Now for the 5th and final vampire tale. Again in England, this time we find ourselves at Blandford. A tiny English town of Blandford is a chocolate box town not so far from the popular country retreat of Dorset. The tranquility of the town was shattered in 1762 when a servant going by the name William Doggett made the poor choice of robbing his master. Instead of finding happiness in the wealth of his ill-gotten gains, William slipped into deep sadness, this culminating with the former servant taking his own life a short year later. In a pattern that you are probably well aware of, death was not the end for poor William Doggett. Locals began to say that they had seen the man in the streets of the town in the middle of the night and that he was driving a phantom carriage, hunting the streets of Blandford to satisfy his newly acquired taste for human blood. Once again, using the safety provided by daylight, the villagers found the man's grave and removed the body. They were shocked when what they found was a body as fresh as the day it had been buried. This was the confirmation of William's transformation into a vampire. Under the guidance of a priest, the body was subjected to the same treatment seen in the Alnwick Castle Vampire and Johannes Countess tales, and peace then return to the Inked Town. These few stories are just the tip of the proverbial steak when talking about real vampires. There are many stories and legends about alleged real-life vamps. Many of these are much scarier than the popular tales like Dracula or Twilight, although the latter terrifies for another reason. What vampire legends and stories do you enjoy? Do you believe that the hematologically challenged are among us? What experience with the undead have you had? Let me know in the comments below. As always, if you like what I do here on the channel, hit that red button, like and share. You can catch the latest by searching We Are If. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.